We're rolling. So a couple housekeeping things before I start this off. We put a little bit more on the wall so it's not a stale white wall. In that, you might see in some shots there's a crack on virtual reality. That's Larry's fault. There's a crack on cryptocurrency. That's my fault. We kept bumping into things trying to set up this morning. It's been an adventure. So I'm here with Lucian Fogoros of iiot World. Now Lucian's been in the industry for a while. I originally met him 3 years ago, I think at like a local Team Neo event. He's kind of been a voice. He's always around, so he's very credible. I knew that, so I knew that I wanted to get him on here. Finding people that specialize in IoT, specifically IIoT, is particularly difficult, despite the fact that it's a pretty big industry. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm very happy that you're here. Why don't you give us a rundown on kind of your background and how you got to be here?
Sure, thank you. So, been around the industry for about 20 years in industrial software, so always basically connected things. When you look at the industrial IoT world, it's not something, it's an evolution, right? So we've always been connected. Some industry are much more advanced than others, so if you look at the automotive, it's been connected, it's been extracting value, and you look some of the energy, for instance, we're just getting started there. Not as advanced in the maturity curve. Now, how did I get started? I've always worked in software, so I'm a developer by background, software engineer. Started my career with a PC-based control software here in Chagrin Falls. Okay. I went to Cleveland State undergrad and grad school at Case Western for business and finance, but I've always practiced in industrial software from development role to product management, product marketing at global level. How we got started with iiot World, it was I also have a passion for education, so I'm on a board of advisors for the computer engineering department at Cleveland State University. I'm also the chairman for the engineering technology for industry advisors. I also have a passion for education, so as I had the opportunity to travel around a couple of times around the world and met with various customers and C-level people, it was very obvious that this wave of technology, it's people don't realize the opportunity. So yes, while there's analysts arguing over what the amount of value is going to be extracted by IoT, when we looked at it and says, even if you put yourself in the front of the wind, there's still a huge opportunity for an educational portal. And I was also frustrated with the existing trade publications. You're not covering IoT. So coupling that, I teamed up with Carolina. Her background is journalism, so she wrote her PhD thesis comparing traditional versus digital. And the idea was to educate the C-level people. We figured that if you start at the top, the visionary C-level, what does IoT mean to you, and what it might mean to somebody in Michigan? What does Industry 4.0, China 2025, whatever you refer in the local region, we try to bring people that kind of walk and go to various conferences, understand the technology, and say, give us a rundown what it might mean to somebody in Great Lakes area, in Cleveland area, and what it might mean to a owner of a business in this area. So we brought him on a portal to basically educate, and we have no advertisement to date there. It's simple and educational portal, and today we grew to approaching 200,000 people. This is in 2.5 years. So we're living explosive times. Yeah. The marketing is no longer a guessing game. Basically, it's a math of marketing. It's quite simple as that. You can reach pretty much. There's probably a company this week is going to have 1 billion reach on one of their campaigns. So imagine that, how long it took the radio to reach 50 million people.
Sure, yeah. The internet's an amazing conduit to meet other, or to get your message out, I guess. So when you look at IoT and IIoT in the broader industry, what do you view as that like adoption in the workplace? Obviously, the media hasn't really been covering it, which again, it's hard to find experts on IIoT, especially in the Midwest. But what do you think the general outlook is for implementing IIoT?
So there's still a challenge in adopting. There's people don't know what they don't know. They've been used to relying in the industrial space. A manufacturer used to rely on a corner distributor to give them the information, right? So a vendor in Europe or a vendor here in Cleveland, they had a distribution channel that will bring a box of donuts, and that's what the source of information had been. They also carry stock, right? None of this are relevant anymore. So the changing model, the distributors, it's there. The writing on the wall is there if you don't reinvent yourself. Because Amazon changed that. You don't need to carry stock because they can deliver the next day or sometime even the same day. It's no longer relevant to be close to the customer, in my mind, the closest resource, but it's the most relevant is to have the best resource available, and technology solves that problem. So those are some of the things. So a lot of people don't realize the value to be extracted. They still think that you have to have some expensive solution giving you some nice dashboard. Perhaps they don't realize that you don't have to pay large vendors to extract that data. There is another way to do that.
Sure.
And I think that's one challenge. There's also cybersecurity concern, which you know very well.
Yeah.
In the industrial space, of course, we thought they were isolated. So for the most, I divided era into two eras, right? The BS era, the before Stuxnet and the post Stuxnet.
Yeah.
Before Stuxnet, nobody took anybody serious. In the
Sure.
post Stuxnet, there is several companies that do that in the industrial space. There's 700 companies that do, in cybersecurity, maybe a couple of dozen of them, they do it well. But there's still a little more work to be on the sensors, so there's some concerns with that as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, from a cybersecurity perspective, the challenge has always been we need to rush this product out here. We need to rush these IoT, devices out there, and they don't really put any thought into security. So it just never was there in the first place. As far as not necessarily companies implementing it, but the challenge is once it's implemented. Are you seeing? I guess let's backtrack a little bit. So when somebody is implementing IoT, I think the idea is that it's going to save them money. It's gonna in the long run. Maybe short term it will cost a lot, but long term they're going to save so much money. They're going to have all this additional security, or security in terms of money being freed up. Is that true? I guess so. I had Jason Ginter on here not too long ago, and I guess the biggest stumbling a little bit here, but the biggest misconception on SD-WAN, which is what he's an expert on, is that it's going to save them money. It's a better way to network. It's not necessarily going to save them money. Is that the case with IoT?
Well, I have a slightly different opinion on that, and I think that when you look at IoT, everybody's in a different maturity level, different, if you will. If you look at the Purdue model, the 5 levels, level 0, level 1, the sensor, then you got the controller, and all the way to the manufacturing light out. So let's take that for example. It's everybody is in a different journey. Some people may jump from level 2 all the way to level 4. So some people are already at the level 4 operating. So everybody has a different path on their journey. So yes, do I think that the IoT will be disrupting every industry? Yes, I do. But I think we have to take where are you, and don't just don't just do IoT for the sake of technology. You have to look at in terms of what does your process look like, what does your technology look like perhaps as well, and what do the people need to be as, and then look at where opportunities for extracting value. That's as I referenced I think earlier, the automotive may be more advanced than the energy. If you look at this building, is there ways to extract more value by having inexpensive sensor that would be basically dimming the lights or maybe turning them off where you don't need them, or the air conditioning and so on. So I think every industry, wherever you might be, so has a different path, and in every company, it's different for a large manufacturer than, for instance, 20 or people or less companies that the owner is also the CTO.
Yeah. So when you're looking at implementing IoT use cases, when does IoT make sense? Or when does IIoT make sense, rather?
I think, if you look at it, when does it make sense? Well, again, you have to evaluate and understand your process and what are you trying to fix. I wouldn't just go to do IoT for the sake of doing IoT. I'll look like, is there a way? Let's say Port of Cleveland, for instance. So there's ships coming in, there's trucks that have to do that. As the ships coming in, it's great to have sensors that are connected to know exactly when they're going to be in, and if they're going to be delayed half a day or a day, then perhaps everything else that's connected, the trucks, the people you pay to offload that ship, that has to be adjusted the schedule, so you don't just pay to wait around. So when does IoT make sense? Everybody has to look internally, and I'm not the expert. I mean, we build these things, bring in over 300 global experts on it. Yes, I worked in industrial software implementing long before it was IoT. I've done in 2000, for instance, a system in pharmaceutical where the order came from the internet, automatically processed, dropped the contact lens into a bin, and basically put the invoice automatically and then sorted to the automatically to the appropriate truck. That was not called IoT at the time. They were doing it because the technology helped. So what are three things that makes the IoT appealing, right? I mentioned earlier it's an evolution, not the industrial IoT, it's an evolution process versus IoT, and we can separate those two things. But there is the cost of hardware is approaching zero, right? When I started my career, industrial computer could cost us from $6,000 to $20,000. We merged the company that did those things. Now you take an iPad that basically it's $300 and you enclose it and it's a fully washable IP65, whatever you call it, first off. Then extracting the data from that, it's approaching zero. You used to call a company down the street, they used to charge you as much as $18,000 from a controller to extract the data. Now, if you don't extract it from the controller, you can perhaps build a circuit because the cost of the hardware is approaching zero. The third element is also, which is key that everybody kind of started to realize, is the business model is changing. The industrial automation used to cost quite a lot of money, right? So it was available only to a few.
Only to the largest, you know, not middle market manufacturers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now you can go to different model, pay per fee. There are companies, for instance, that looks at the machine for perhaps $50 a month, right? You don't have to spend $50,000 for a project to do that. They are fine charging you per machine. Long term, they might make a little more money, but you're happy because you don't have to spend that much money up front. So those are at least the three elements that, as you look to make sense in your own organization, when does industrial IoT make sense? I would filter it to those three. And there's the fourth element, right? Everybody talks about IT-OT convergence. What does this IT and OT convergence means, right? So you got the specialists that always address the computer, and then you got the specialists of the process. You know, everybody had a different focus and still have a different focus. Now you need more and more of that skill set of the IT on the plant floor, and they have to come together. And I would say IIoT also brings a fresh perspective on this, because IT thinks that anything that's called PLC, that we've been automating things, or HMI and SCADA, thinks that's old. Yeah. Rightfully so. And IoT brings a fresh perspective. So this is the fourth element, I would say, that people don't talk much about it, but it's also reality. There's 400 platforms available to do IoT in various flavors of industrial IoT. Yeah. And it solves different problems. You may be niche for, let's say, in this area for CNC machining to extract some more value. Maybe other ones may be better for building automation. Other ones may be better for manufacturing that's making parts for whatever, for air conditioning and so on.
So when you look at kind of the Midwest or even America versus maybe Europe's where they're at, what are the differences? What do you see? Do you see smaller European countries or companies rather adopting this more readily than smaller American companies, a little bit bigger, so on and so forth? I guess just kind of give us a bird's eye view on the differences between the two.
Sure. So this is an interesting question, because also I've been located here in Cleveland for the last 28 years, with a few months living in Latin America and the West Coast. But I've always traveled for the last 2.5 years. Just about every month I'm in somewhere, whether it's Europe or some other parts of the world. And I don't know that I've set to analyze, if you will, what are the American companies doing compared to the German companies. But what I've also seen that there are some organizations in some parts of the world that the government helps. Basically, there are incentives for those organizations to move in that direction, to reevaluate. So 2 years ago, when I did in Detroit a speech, it was small to mid-sized companies executives. It was the question was around asked much like how do you evaluate and look at the IoT? Mm-hmm. And the discussion was still set on the traditional way of doing things. That's kind of like those type of discussions seems to, there's companies that went down to adapt, selling their machines, for instance, much like we talked with a new business model, if you will, allowing an entrepreneur to make gizmo month one, not wait to build a factory and so on, so they can plug it in and work. So yes, with some sponsor, you can see some areas that seem to be, but it's like, I think there's, I don't know, there's a clear winner. Yes, you can look in Germany, there are some companies that are more advanced in that, but I think we also can look at some of the examples right here in Cleveland. Like I visited, not Cleveland, in US. 10 days ago I was in Lexington, where, you know, there's implementation right here in our backyards of this. So I think it's also depending on various industries. Also, you have to look at various company sizes and try to compare, do an apple to apple.
Sure.
And then some people are better at marketing too.
right. Yeah, I think that. Do you see? So I have heard actually from some people at Hitachi Vantara. I don't know how much you've interacted with them, that they've had a lot more success getting smaller European manufacturers to adopt some of those technologies for IoT, or IIoT rather, and they haven't had the same amount of success, particularly in the Midwest. Do you think that? What do you think the drawback is to being a mid-market or a smaller size manufacturer and adopting some of these, you know, potentially cost prohibitive IIoT technologies?
Yeah, so I think it's the awareness. It's the awareness of what you can do. And it shouldn't be necessarily, the discussion shouldn't necessarily be, do you have an IoT strategy or stuff like that. You should really look at what can you improve. There are some organizations here, I would also argue that there are some US companies that have success here because they've approached it in that manner. They approach it at the beginning perhaps in a consultative role. Let me pick around your organization and see what value I could extract. We do this pilot, and then if you're okay, we can expand it and grow to multiple plants and so on. So that approach seems to be working here. So sometimes an approach that may work in Europe or in other parts of the world, it doesn't necessarily work here. And I think we've looked at this. If you take manufacturing alone, that's been dominated by 8 traditional players, right? And now you're opening up to a flood of new technologies. And people are reluctant. People got burned even with some of the large players here. So they are reluctantly adopting. But I think the time is right. The technology is here to allow them to do that. There was an old saying, is like, nobody got fired for using brand A or brand B. I'm not going to mention any of them.
I used to work for Cisco. I get
it. Right. Well, now they might just do that because it doesn't cost you that much to try that and see that if you put a dashboard and you know, kind of comparing this plan versus that plan in a easy format with a credit card run, there might be some executives that ask that question: why haven't you done it? Why aren't you doing more of those? And whereas some people were scared in the past to do that.
So kind of circling back to IoT world, it's really education's the issue, right? And so you're setting out with this media platform. How are you, which has been doing very well. I mean, obviously I'm reading it too, which is what brought me to you. How are you growing that? How are you working on spreading that awareness and that education?
Gotcha. So we're doing a couple of things that we think we leverage right. So digitally, we think surgically we can find the right people for our audience, and then we also leverage events. So this evening, I'm actually flying to Germany to get a preview of what's going to be in a September show. Been in Dubai, been in West Coast, East Coast. So I do this on a regular basis. We also go to events because we grew this audience to, again, approaching 200,000 people. But what we do, we also carve out some of the audience from those events, and we get those people that are interested in this type of a solution now versus 2 years ago. Let's say you're cybersecurity subject matter experts. Somebody that looked for a solution 2 years ago, by now they probably found it. So you need a person that's raising their hands right now to look at, like, what's available right now, how am I going to look? So that's, I think we managed to do that. We still have to do a lot. There's a lot more to do. So we do a lot of partnerships. That's what helped grow our publication or digital media. Because we do strike partnership, even with a large event as Hanover Mesa that's bringing 218,000 people in one place, or with IoT World in Santa Clara that brings about 12,000 people there I call the IoT enthusiast. And just as a plug for Cleveland, I still think that this is the best place to have that discussion, not on the West Coast, because there it's a lot of vendors to vendors discussion.
Yeah.
This is where manufacturing is. This is where the customer is. So Cleveland has a good potential, Cleveland, Detroit, and it's great.
The Rust Belt, you know. I know everyone wants to move away from that, but there's still manufacturing around here, right?
It's going to be hard to build that manufacturing base in Silicon Valley. Yes, they can get the Kool-Aid and feel good there, but I think this is what the customers, I think, have to move to bring some of the discussion to the customer. I think we started to see that. I think last week was in Marriott. I think it was the Precision Metal Association has a nice conference there, and I think there will be more and more. You mentioned Team Neo. I think they're planning a bigger event this fall as well.
Yeah, everyone's trying to to grow and work, you know, trying to build together. Now, the Team Neo thing's interesting too, because they're IIoT, but they're also they also have a cluster that's centered around 3D printing or additive manufacturing, which is, again, they're really trying to bolster that manufacturing, which seems to be a big divergence between a lot of the other stuff Cleveland's doing today, right? Or at least there's a lot of efforts around bringing more tech, more like startups that are more cryptocurrency focused or blockchain oriented. But we have the manufacturing right now. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I think we should probably invest in both. Yeah. Right. I think that you can't have one without the other. But how has 3D printing or additive manufacturing changed IoT, at least from your lens?
So that's actually very dear to me because I pay for my undergrad working full time for a tool and die shop. So when you look at that, what 3D is doing, right? It used to be taking 3 months to build a mold, and if that mold is a day late, then you get penalized by the aircraft industry just as much as the mold was $300,000 that you get penalized per day late. So when you look at what 3D can do for that to replace, to be able to build that part as needed, that's going to be amazing. What's going to happen in that direction? In fact, I just got an invite last week to join a board of a company in Chicago that does 3D printing and work in that arena. So has that changed? Absolutely, it's changing, because now you can build it much faster. I've seen an organization that basically, like I mentioned, used to take a part to build the mold is 3 months, and then you build the parts. That organization can do a part now in a day and a half and build a prototype and see is it what we need and so on. So look for 3 months and 2 days until you build it the traditional way and do it in a day and a half. Has that changed? Yes.
Yeah, well, I think that's also going to that adds to the overall automation of where manufacturing is going. And I think the other piece to that is what AI and machine learning is doing. Have you? I guess it doesn't have to be necessarily an IoT application, but what has AI changed from like a sensors, or I know AI is particularly the sorting aspect of it, sorting all that data that the sensors get, something that humans just can't do. But how has AI changed the industry from your perspective?
So it's starting to change. I wouldn't say that's completely changed, but it's started to change the industry. And I'll give an example where it might touch just about any company here in the Great Lakes area. Traditionally, for instance, let's just take one example. When you look at quality inspection, there's expensive vision system that you have to do, and they will still continue to be those type of things. It takes long to set up, to program, and so on. Now you can actually leverage AI to train a camera that's attached to some kind of a computer that's running some algorithm that's learning about what a good part, what a bad part might be. Now, that's going to put the quality system in the hands of people that before was not available, leveraging some off-the-shelf tools, or perhaps even a special camera, but it's not an expensive vision system. So that's just one example. If you look at cyber security, right? I mentioned earlier that after 2010, there's a number of companies. There's a lot of work that was done at the network level, level 2 and above, and there are organizations that you can put a nice gizmo in your network, learns about what's a good behavior, what's a bad behavior, and then could take an action. So there's implementation. There's also abused word what AI might do.
Sure.
Because AI, it's not a new term. It's been available for several decades, but what's changing, like I said, is the processing power, right? You can embed it in a chip. I've even seen some organization that built a little hardware device that you can process that at the PLC, so quite fast, if you will,
Sure.
microsecond, millisecond type of level to make that type of a decision there. So when you look at it, we have the potential to have it in just about any industry. I think we're just at the beginning of it. Some organizations are more advanced. I mean, I walked into Chicago a couple of years ago. There was a little collaborative robot, if you will, walking around to people, and it was connected to the Watson, and the price of the retail price was under $20,000. Now imagine even a museum, they might have something like that. You ask around, hey, what is Exhibit A? And you could walk around behind you and tell you more about it.
And the Cleveland Art Museum is a great example of that. Now they're also syncing it with a little bit of like augmented reality with their art lens. But basically, for those of you who don't know what it is, it's this large wall that you can use sensors to kind of scroll through with your hands, and you can see artwork that may not be on display. It may not be in the art museum at all anymore. They might just have rights to it, but it allows you to have a virtual art museum experience, and it's a pretty big space they have. It's a pretty big screen. That's kind of an example of kind of what you can do.
And there's also the kind of thing that I referenced earlier, where the technology could help, basically, where you can get the right specialist online that sees the same thing that you see in front of a machine when you're trying to fix a machine. So you're getting, with the click of a button, the guy that may be traveling in Paris or in Shanghai or in Sao Paulo, you can get them online to help solve their problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And they've been trying to do that for a long time, and I think that they're finally able to do that with some of the ways technology is working. I know a long time ago, Cisco was working on this special room that had to be a special dimension with special paint that basically created a hologram desk that so the other person was kind of in the room to show you what they were doing. I think AR has made that completely outmoded, though I don't think that idea ever saw commercial or business use. Now, I want to actually, so AI is interesting because you're absolutely right. It gets misused a lot because there's, and I had Jason Mancuso on here explaining deep learning versus machine learning, right? And both are different than like general AI, right? So, you have the camp of people that are just writing software based on neural networks. You have some that are thinking that AI is going to take over the world. You have a lot of people that have a concern today that AI is what's going to take away all of their jobs, right? Particularly in manufacturing. And I've heard a lot of people much smarter than me kind of address this, but I also feel that it bears repeating. During the Industrial Revolution, everyone thought their jobs would be gone. When electricity came out, a lot of people thought, well, this is going to be the end of it, right? I obviously am of the camp that AI is an exclusively good thing. I think automation is an exclusively good thing. It frees up people for other tasks. What do you see changing in terms of how people work in a mid-sized manufacturer or a large-sized manufacturer that's really taking to heart IoT, AI, a lot of these things that may make their job a lot less time exhausting,
right? As you well articulated, there will be some jobs that would have to be adjusted. I think I was heading to a speech in Germany, and there was this timely report commenting about this Chinese company, was setting shop in Arkansas. I didn't follow up to see. I should actually do that. Yeah. They're saying they're making minimum wage about $15 because they invested in automation, right?
So that's what Amazon's done.
Yeah. Right. So there's no longer, it's a different type of job. Yes, it's no longer the manual labor that's important. They have to adjust. Maybe they have to fix their problem because they invest in robotics, and those robots needs to be fixed and need to be in maintenance and so on. So I'll also give from my personal experience when I would be going I love traveling, so I moved from developing software to actually traveling with the salespeople as a technical, so I would provide assistance. So sometimes I would walk into the 3 automakers in Michigan, and there were some plants that I wouldn't they could pay me 5 times as more. I wouldn't do it because of the concerns with the health. It was oil in the environment. You can cut the oil with a knife. Yeah. Those jobs, I mean, yes, I like those people to be refocused on something else. And yes, it's painful when you lose a job. And some people may take it harsher than others, but every one of those situations also creates an opportunities. I think people, if they keep a positive mind, they find other things. They're more passionate, and they be much better off than sticking around with those jobs.
Yeah, I think that's an incredibly important message to drive home, because with any emerging technology, there's this fear like this is it, this is the end, it's changing. No, it will change. Everything's going to change. And on that note, as far as IIoT is concerned, what do you see on the horizon as the next big changes or the next advancements?
So certainly you're going to start to see a lot more application that AI would help, and the cost of driving that. Certainly you've mentioned 3D printing. I think we're going to see a lot more customization and batch one, if you will, size. That's going to help. I think as people start connecting things, it'll allow us to be able to have more of the batch size one. So massive customization. There's already happening in various parts, but I think that people, if they take a fresh look, they could view that. Now, I also invite analysts and people that do a much better job. They spend, I spoke with over 2,000 companies in the last couple of years.
Sure.
But what I also bring is I bring the analysts that take a look at the future and where we're going to be at. So on that note, if it's okay, just a parenthesis, we have an upcoming AI and IoT virtual conference. We have something on industrial cybersecurity at the end of the month that we're doing with Trend Micro. We have something that's coming up where we bring not just the analysts, but also some of the vendors. So tell me what you have and give me some case studies. And I push them to bring a customer to talk about how they've implemented. You mentioned augmented reality, how they've implemented that. So for the most part, again, we've been in a mode. We did a little bit of reports. We're expanding and doing some more reports, but for the most part, I bring the subject matter experts on our portal to do that.
So and that actually, so we're kind of nearing to the end of our time here. But if you want, if there's one takeaway, and we'll get to where to find your event, later. But what are some closing thoughts, I guess, you have on IoT today? Where to go for information? Anything else you want to plug? I mean, the floor is yours.
Right. So there's a lot of information. Everybody's jumping in IT. I think you have to look at what the problems you're solving versus everybody slapped on the old case study use case a new name, and it's IoT. And I've seen something just took IT and put IoT because it was a cool trend. So I would say is look at some of this organization with fresh eyes. Maybe if I were a manufacturer, I would definitely invite some of these new organizations because they bring a fresh perspective. When we were 3 weeks old, we got invited to The Economist as media partners in Chicago to cover their innovation summit. They were asking me, what was the trade publication doing in 2017 at the time?
Yeah.
It was 3 weeks old. And I said, well, we want to offer a large company and a small company, the same seat at the table. Because large company have deep pockets, and small organizations, they have content. They are much faster, they are much more progressive. They start a clean sheet. So when you look at it, some of the small organizations are providing that. And how would you filter which one is maybe good, maybe bad? Maybe look at what some of the larger players, they're hedging their bets, right? Because now you see a startup that's got investment for 2 competing brands. And maybe you look, are they betting on their future? Some of them, they're just acquiring them, and so on. So when it comes to getting education, we're set up to basically iiot-world.com is as an education portal. We don't have everything that we do in there, so we have the virtual educational sessions. You can also view them, the past ones, so you can kind of take a look at what we've done, but also some of the upcoming one that's looking not just on how you leverage augmented reality in manufacturing or IoT or AI, but also looking at how you secure that, maybe looking at new business models. In fact, upcoming we have an interesting business model how startups or companies that may look for to get new business, or entities that have problems in organization that could list the problem and have an ecosystem of several thousand people from around the world bid on that, solving that problem.
Yeah.
So that's actually something we have with Accenture and Sensei, as well as sponsored by Schneider Electric, a marketplace for the industrial space. So those are some of the things that we're doing there.
Yeah, awesome. And you could find all that on iiot-world.com.
Correct.
Okay, and I'll have all the notes so where you can just click on them. But no, like I said, I really appreciate it. I think it's very important not to have a product where you just plaster every single buzzword you can find on your own thing. I certainly wouldn't do that to a book I wrote. But yeah, no, I think that a lot of people want to be IoT when they aren't, right? That's a big true, and the same is true for blockchain. The same is true for AI, right? It's people see something that's hot, they jump on it.
Yeah, exactly. And we've
Yeah.
I had to tell one large vendor, which was a big customer for us, that says, hey, your white paper that's 25 pages, on page 20 or 12, whatever it was, over 20 times you mentioned the product name. That isn't going to be the way you get in this space.
It's not a white paper. That's a sales slick. Yeah, right? So, all right. Like I said, I really appreciate you coming in. You'd probably love to have you on again, sometime soon. The industry changes every 5 minutes, so I'm sure we'll always have something to talk about. But yeah, nothing but gratitude for you coming on, man. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah.
And thank you for listening.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we're good.